Morning and welcome to this webinar from Signicat concerning MitID. We are very happy that you've chosen to spend some time this morning to listen what we have to say about MitID and the implementation of MitID. And my name is Lars Duval. I'm the country product manager here in Signicat, and with me I have Farooq.
Yes, and good morning from me as well. My name is Farooq Rashid. I'm the customer success manager in Signicat. And now I will let Lars take over the mic. Here you go, Lars.
Thank you. So let's dive into this agenda that we have prepared for today. We look very much forward to go through this, and let's begin. Yes, let's dive into this presentation here and hear what we're going to cover in this webinar. So we have a short disclaimer, of course, but the agenda looks like this. I will give a short introduction to the status of MitID Business. I will cover the content that we have chosen to include in Signicat's MitID Business. Farooq will talk about how you will be able to get onboarded and the process around the onboarding. Then I will cover the services that can be purchased from Signicat and the roadmap that we have chosen to develop a little bit further down the road. Finally, of course, we will take some questions in and hear if you have anything you would like to hear more about or something is not clear. And that should wrap it up. So that's the agenda for this webinar. So let's go here. Initially, I'll talk a little bit about the status of MitID, and there are some general activities taking place. As you know, the prerequisite for all of this is the sunset of NemID, and it will be closed down in June the 30th this year, which gives sort of a short window for implementing the MitID of business, and that's of course also why so many of you are here now. It is NemID login who's handling the implementation of MitID business, unlike MitID private, where it's fixed. And they have recently opened so that organizations with more than 3 certificate holders can now be onboarded. And they have done a great job so far. More than 100,000 organizations have already implemented MitID business through the NemLogin setup. So they have come a long way, but still the larger organizations has just recently started to be implemented. So there's still a little way to go. And also they have developed some issues about the functionalities of MitID. Recently, it was made possible for you to implement users with foreign passports as well, as long as they have the ID cards have chips that can be used for the user's implementation process. PID and RID services are closely connected to the NemID, so they will be deprecated. Instead, they will use the UUID, unique identifier, that MitID is built upon. But there's no date for the closure of this yet, so we have yet to see when they'll be out of service. You should also notice, I think that even though you have implemented MitID business, you can still use NemID employee certificates functionality until it's closed down. So even though you've actually implemented the MitID business, it doesn't mean that you have to use it. You can still use NemID certificate functionality until the end of June. And I think for some that would be convenient, but it's up to you. So that's the general status of MitID here, and things that I think that you should be aware of in this context. So let's move on here and talk a little bit about the content of MitID business. For those of you who were part of the webinar we held back in November, you can perhaps recognize this slide here. Because what it shows is that you have actually got 2 elements in the MitID business implementation. There's a service provider organization implementation, which is your own implementation towards NemLogin, so your employees can use MitID business. And there's the other part here on the left side where Signicat is relevant, where we help you being able to provide your services to your corporate users. This is where Signicat is located, and we handle the integration towards NemLogin on your behalf, so you can identify the business users and make sure that they are who they claim to be. But I think from your perspective, the right side with your own implementation is probably a larger project for you, at least for most of you, to take that implementation and make it happen, whereas the other part is widely handled by brokers like Signicat. There's been some confusion, or it's easy to confuse a little perhaps the terms that are being used on MitID because they are so similar. So we have the MitID Business, which we're talking about now, but we also have MitID Private to Business, and we have MitID Private. I will try to illustrate here in this slide here the difference. And if we talk about MitID Business, the user actually has two opportunities together with you. They can choose to use the private MitID identity, or you can choose that the organization have solved a dedicated MitID business identity that your employees use. And the distinction is clear, of course, but if you choose the private MitID identity, you need to have both you and the employee and the business have to accept and agree that this is the approach. You can't just force it on your employees that they have to use the private. But there are two tracks on that, so to speak. MitID Private to Business, this is solely for business with sole proprietary, meaning one-person companies. And they'll use their private MitID identity. And this is important because the private and the business is two different things. So when you buy, for instance, MitID Private, you also have the opportunity to use private to business. And it is a little bit confusing. But here we are trying to show it from the slide and our perspective. And then, of course, lastly, there's the private one where the users use their own private identity. But especially distinguishing between MitID Business and private to business can be a little bit difficult if you're not working with on a daily basis. If we a little bit more specific here, you can also see we listed up the principles behind it. So MitID Business are connected to NemLogin, who also handled your onboarding. And whereas prior to business, the data is actually from Virk when they look up business data. And that's a distinction that's worth noticing. And as I mentioned before, the MitID Erhverv or business, you can have a dedicated user for the business, or you can use your private. And this is actually new if you compare with NemID employee certificates, because there it was not possible to use your private MitID user. So that's one of the very few differences between NemID and MitID, because otherwise they're actually very similar in most respects. But it replaces, of course, what they call NemID Moses, or the employee signature, whereas private to business, it replaces NemID private to business. So these are the main differences that you should be aware of. But let's talk about MitID Business and how it looks. You can see to the right the user interface that will meet you once you use it. But it requires that you and your customers enroll on MitID Business according to the directions from Digitaliseringsstyrelsen. And as mentioned before, this functionality is very similar, also but with the difference of using private identity if you both agree. The so-called double frivillighedsprincip, as it's called in Danish. But what does it look like once you start using MitID Business? These steps here should illustrate what your users will meet. First, they'll be prompted with using the user ID, the Bruger ID, where they enter that. Once that's done, they verify the identity, and most of them will do it through the app, so that's how I illustrated it here. But of course, you can also do it using other devices if you choose so. And then once they have verified that, they'll meet the MitID Business interface. And what you can see from step 3 here is that based on the data they send towards MitID, the options that they have will appear. And some users will have multiple options because they can represent multiple companies, and others just have one or two. But it's important that these options here are based on the input that was given from the user ID, because that's what this is based upon. But also, as you can see, the user interface is very similar to what you know from MitID, and that's of course intentional. So the users will feel as little difference as possible. Enlarge it here a little bit so you can see it perhaps better. But the key point here is that the options are based on both what organizations they are attached to, but also whether the person has agreed with his or her company to use the private as a representative for them. In some cases, if they use a private profile, there can be an extra step with the CPR match, as you already have seen with private MitID. So this was the introduction to MitID Business, and you can see the implications are not that big, but it's still an implementation that's needed if you are handling corporate customers. But what's perhaps a little bit more interesting is what Farooq will be talking about now, is how you can get Signicat MitID Business and what is included in the onboarding process, because that's something that you will meet if you choose Signicat's MitID Business. So Farooq, please take it away here and let them know what you have to say about the onboarding process.
Yes, and I will now proceed from Lars's presentation with how to get Signicat MitID Business in your environment, how to get started with that. So first of all, we need some steps that you need to go through. And in this case, the onboarding manager will be the technical expert that configures, supports you with the technical questions. So let me walk you through the steps. First of all, on the preparation part, we need to have the contract signed, and then the access will be given to you regarding how to get started with the onboarding. We need to have the signature on the contract in order to be in compliance and due to the GDPR legislation. When we have received the signed contract, then the onboarding manager will start up the pre-production environment, so you can actually start to commence the testing of the solution. So the onboarding manager will send you the pre-production credential. Customer can then directly connect to the API, and the onboarding manager will of course be ready to guide you through the process. When you as a customer is satisfied with the setup and solution, then you will be ready for the production environment, and the onboarding manager will, on this step, share the credentials for the production environment, which is of course different from the pre-production environment. And through all the process, the onboarding manager is ready to support you with questions and best practices. So when you as a customer are ready to go live, then we will of course also be available with the support to ensure that your go live is a success. And we will of course also follow you to help you with getting the solution up and running. When you're ready for go live, then we will of course be ready to answer all your questions, and you can of course also contact our support. So let's wrap it up. As soon as the contract has been signed and approved, the onboarding team will start the process. You can expect some waiting time, since at the moment we have a lot of customers switching from NemID to MitID Business, and therefore the waiting time can be a bit more than usual. The documentation is of course available on our website, which is listed in the presentation here. Now I will hand over the presentation to Lars, who will talk a bit about services and the roadmap ahead. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks a lot, Farooq, for talking about the onboarding process. I hope you found it interesting. Now I will turn a little bit towards the services that we're actually providing today, and some of the thoughts we've done about what's going to happen after we release the MitID Business. This is an overview of the services that we already provide. We got two basic services, so to speak. We got the authentication part, and we got the signing part. So both for MitID for private and MitID for business, you can choose either or both of signing and authentication. So that's all of the basic services. Whereas we call them methods. That's our terminology here in Signicat. We got the MitID for business offered to you. We got the MitID private, and then private for business, as I was talking about earlier, is sort of it's an add-on. It's not something that you need to have, so we call it an add-on, and it's for the sole proprietorships, as mentioned earlier. So these are the 2.5 methods that we offer. If we turn to the user experience add-ons first, because that's they're the ones that are mostly used among our customers, we got the graphical profile and subdomain, and the graphical profile gives you an opportunity to individualize and make it much more in line with your own corporate virtual image, if you like. So you can get more supporting text to the interface and so on. The subdomain part is more a support of showing to your customer that they are still operating within your company's services, which is of course provide them with a much safer feeling than if it says Signicat at MitID.dk. CPR match, on the other hand, is an opportunity for you to get an extra safety measure attached to your service, so you can make a check of the CPR number that the customer used towards the database to have an extra check that this is actually the person that you want to interact with. So it will of course influence the user experience, but it will provide you as a company with increased measure of safety around the process. The one-way session transfer is an opportunity for you to improve your end users' experience when they use both you and perhaps a partner that you work together with, because it allows you to have only one MitID authentication in the process. So let's say that they use your services initially and need to go to your partner's website afterwards to buy additional services or similar. Then they don't need to sign in again with a MitID authentication. They can just consent to sharing the MitID data, and then they are transferred to your partner's website. So that is an improvement of the user experience of your customers. The payment add-ons, as you see here, we got 3 of these. We got the PSD2 compliance, we got the transaction consent, and 3D secure. All of them are targeting the payment industry, so to speak, or the payment companies. The PSD2 compliance add-on is a way to make sure that the customer is not made aware of where in the login procedure they have failed. as is demanded by the PSD2 legislation. The transaction consent gives you a chance to individualize the text of when they are giving consent to a certain action. You can make that individual rather than just have a standard text following all the transactions that they're using with your service. That gives, of course, the user a feeling of, okay, this is exactly what I was intending to buying, so I'm okay with giving consent to this. So that is useful in many circumstances. The 3D Secure is a way of integrating the final approval of the transaction in the same frame as you're working in when you do the purchase. Instead of having to open up a new tab, you can have it in the same window to see, okay, this is actually the transaction that I want to approve. So that is a third add-on for the payment companies. But so this is the offering that we have at the moment for you, and usually, especially the user experience add-ons have been popular among our customers. So this might be worth considering if you don't have them already. If we turn to new functionality that we have in pipeline, so the first one of the services that we have available for you in the coming period will be a supporting function for MitID for Business. MitID for Business, when they do the authentication, it is check whether you as a person have affiliation with a company, and that's it. And in some instances, you need more than that. You need to know whether the person have signing rights and what signing setup that company has. And this service will provide this through a lookup in Virk to see if the company is mentioned here as bearing signing rights, and also to see what signing policies they have. Do they have, is it enough with just one signer, or do we need more than that? And this can actually be automated, so you can have an automatic approval of that, or if the person's name doesn't match what's in Virk, or you need to be aware of something with signing rights, it will make you aware of this, so you can check these cases. Or if there's no match at all, it'll say fail. So this can be bought as an API, so you integrate to your own solution, or we can also provide a case management user interface. I've just added a screenshot here on the right, so you can see what it looks like, but there are a little bit more screenshots to choose from this. Of course, there are limitations to this because this is based on Virk, so it doesn't cover instances like power of attorney and specific roles within your customer's organization. But it can check whether this person actually do have signing rights, which can be useful in many cases. The next service that we have in pipeline is risk scoring. I don't know if you're aware of it, but MitID is actually able to deliver some risk attributes that can be used for this. And we will make it possible to use these data to sort of getting an immediate evaluation of the user authenticating themselves. So we will be applying some fraud rules to these attribute data that is made available, so you can choose what's the level of risk you're willing to bear in the authentications. This is not an online fraud prevention thing taking place. This is done based on data that come from the authentication, but you can have an evaluation of what is taking place. So, for instance, if recurring users use your service, you actually know whether there's something phishing going on. And as mentioned, MitID carry actually a lot of risk attributes that can be used for this purpose, like geodata, data about you, your device, when were you last logged in, have a lot of failed attempts to log in and such. So there are a lot of attributes that can be used. And the screenshot on your right here, you'll see that you can actually make sort of a threshold definition of how much risk do you want to bear with these data here. So you will be notified if something gets out of the range that you feel comfortable with. This is also available, as you can see here, with an API, with a user interface, also with a case management page, so you can see cases that you need to be aware of and handling. So this could be a support to your fraud initiatives within your company. You can customize these settings yourself, as you can see here. So it's actually very individual what comes out of this, but this will, I'm sure, be useful for a lot of you. The first service that I mentioned before with the lookup in Virk will be available quite soon, whereas this will come a little bit later with the authentication risk scoring. But these are the key elements in our pipeline that we look forward to offer to you, because we think we need to supply extra functionality to the basic of MitID in order for you to find it useful and to get it in the setups that you find is needed for your business. So we hope that you find this interesting, and we'll let you know more once we are ready to launch them. But as I mentioned, the lookup will be the first one, and then the risk scoring afterwards. Yes, so let's move on and see if we got any questions from our audience. If there's something we need to elaborate a little bit on, or something's not perfectly clear. Now we got some time to look at that. So Farooq, let's see what we have for us.
Hi again. Yeah, we have an interactive audience today. So let's start with the first one. Will the slides be shared afterwards, Lars?
Oh, that's an easy one. If you like the slides, please reach out to us, because we'll send out the recording to whoever has enlisted for this webinar. But if you need the slides, please write to me afterwards. You'll see the email later on.
Okay,
yeah.
The next one. Do we need both MitID Private for business and MitID Business? That's two different things, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And as I illustrated with the slides earlier, it's two different audiences, so to speak. If you have customers who have sole proprietorships, they will be using MitID for private to business. Whereas you have customers with more than one employee, they'll be using MitID Business. So I definitely recommend, if you have both types, that you also have MitID for business. Yes.
Perfect. Another one. How long does it take to implement MitID for our customers?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. As you talked about before, there's some different steps in it, but it'll take about 2 weeks to implement it on our customer side. Of course, it will depend a little bit on the complexity, because there can be huge differences between our customers. But in average, we expect 2 weeks from we reach out to them and say, no, now we're ready to implement. Because I know some of you have already signed a contract with us, but it's not 2 weeks from when the contract was signed, but from we start to reach out and start the onboarding process. Yeah.
Good answer on that one. So the next one I have here is, let me check. Why do I need the Virk lookup when I have the integration to NemLogin, where customers have registered the person in question?
Yeah, as mentioned in one of the earlier slides, it's 2 different lookup places that you use. One of them is based on the data from Virk, and one is based on data from NemLogin. And MitID for Business is based on data from NemLogin. So you'll actually only know that they're affiliated with the company. And in some cases, you'll need to know that they're actually if they actually have the right to sign, which will be needed in some cases. So that makes a difference. In some instances, it will be enough to know that they're affiliated with the company, but in other cases, you'll actually need to know that they must have signing rights, and what the policies of the signing rights are.
That makes perfectly sense.
Happy.
The last one
that
we have right now is, when will we have this functionality available? That's an interesting one, right?
Yeah, Yeah, and I assume that our viewer here means the functionality for Virk, because that's when I talked about the roadmap there. So assuming that we're talking about Virk and risk data, the Virk, I hope the data and the functionality will be available before summer, whereas the risk data scoring will be a little bit later. We're talking fall, I expect, for that functionality. But we got some markups already available, so if some customers would like to have a demo or perhaps test it in test environment, we might be able to arrange that if that makes sense and they are interested in trying it out. But approximately before summer for the lookup in Virk, and fall for the risk scoring data.
Yeah, I guess there are a lot of our customers interested in jumping into this lookup services through MitID.
Yeah, I expect so. We have had some meetings with some customers to present the idea for them, and they found it interesting. But still, I would like to also to have them test it if that so they can get them all the hands-on, so to speak, to see if it's what they expected. But the dialogue so far has been positive for the functionalities, at least for those two.
Thank you so much, Lars, because now I need to look at the time and it's running fast. So that was, I guess that was all for today. And
yeah,
I don't know if you have any last comments.
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up in a minute. But I'm happy that we had some questions from the audience, because it's not always whether it makes sense or it's perfectly understandable what you're communicating. So thanks a lot for that. So those were the questions, and I'm very happy that you also had some interaction. So we had a chance to elaborate a little bit on where you needed more information. And for those of you who didn't get your question answered, I will get back to you, of course, with answers to that one as well. So don't worry, there'll be answers to all the questions. So finally, let's see what's going to happen now. We will, of course, send you the recording from the webinar along with some links to further details if you think you need to know more, or you think, okay, let's check this out. There are links to our development pages, how to reach out to us, and all sorts of stuff within the mail with the recording. So don't worry, there'll be information for you there, and of course we'll supplement with slides to you who ask for it specifically. So if you want to know more about MitID from Signicat, you will find a lot of useful links in the mail that you'll get from us. And we will be very happy to set up a meeting with your contact person, or if you're new customers, just reach out and we'll find who is useful, the right person for you to talk to. You can see my email down here in the bottom as well, if you think you need to know more about what we talked about here. Just don't hesitate, reach out to me, and I'll get back to you as fast as I can. So thanks a lot for taking your time here this morning with us, talking about MitID Business. We hope it was lived up to your expectations. And as mentioned before, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're very happy to keep dialogue with all of you. So don't hesitate. But have a nice day, and thanks from both me and Farooq and for participating. And talk to you later.